Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, about 7:30 Central Time, 8:30 Eastern Time. Just coming to you with a pre-market update as well as some earnings plays for today, February 7th, 2019. So we can start here with the ES futures, which is the S&P 500 futures. You can see that in the overnight there has been some weakness in the S&P, um, starting at around 1 o'clock in the morning, and uh, it has rolled over. You can see it better on the daily chart here. We talked about it, it being up at its 200-day moving average, um, and it has started to roll over at least in the pre-market. So we'll be looking for probably more short plays versus long on days where the market is down. And it actually works out quite well because most of the earnings plays that we're looking at are actually shorts or short bounces. Okay, so the first one, we did talk about this last night, but just giving you an update on FireEye. This is the one that we last night it was kind of hovering around this area of 17 and talked about it going all the way down to this pivot here at 16 and potentially bouncing. If it gets below that pivot, the next target here is this trend line. So, just keep an eye out. It looks like it's bouncing a little bit on the $16 pivot. Also 16 is a round number, so it may find some support there. Granted, we're still an hour from the market open, so hopefully it will maintain in this area, and we can at least get a bounce play off the 16 or off of this trend line. So that's one piece. Second piece. So anyway, just as a reminder, what we're looking for in FireEye is either continued weakness off the open with this target here of the longer term trend line, or a bounce play off of the $16 level, which is where it is right now. It could actually go all the way down to this trend line and then bounce. So if you don't trade it right off the open for a short play for about 40, 50 cents, uh, you could wait until it hits the trend line for a subsequent bounce. But it is showing a lot of weakness this morning, so keep an eye on that and see how it acts off the open. Um, we'll go on to the next one. The next stock that we talked about from yesterday was Chipotle. So that one we actually talked about 579 being a pivot of resistance. So I need to pull this up a little bit. So it is going to be gapping up around this 579 level this morning because the market's rolling over. It's also showing some weakness here. It's already dropped down to 572. So that's $7 that it's already come down. So I would be careful in the morning. If it comes back up, if it starts to drift back up to this 579 level, look for a continued resistance at 579, and I would be looking for resistance to play a little short rollover play. Uh, as far as targets, you've got the 50-day, the 50 moving average, you have the 200 moving average uh, on the 5 minute, as well as the retracements that we talked about yesterday of the overnight session. So that's what I'm looking for in Chipotle. Of course, if it does blow through 579 for some reason, it's already up 22%. If it blows up past 579, you have some other pivots, and we talked about potentially even um, the Fibonacci extensions from the overnight session being potential targets as well. So because there's such a big gap between 579 and 633, you have these extension levels to look at as well. So that's Chipotle. I won't talk about iRobot because it's just not setting up, but I do want to talk about a couple that reported this morning. So we talked about Twitter, and I actually uh, thought this would be a oops thought this would be a positive earnings report, which it was, but the stock has pardon me, the stock has subsequently um, fallen quite hard. So, whereas we were talking about it potentially kind of coming up to this 37.48 pivot and then rolling over, it's already, because of this pattern here, this basing pattern, we thought that this 37.48 would be a level of resistance, and then it may roll over at that point, but it has already just kind of gapped down. So it's all the way down here um, at this 3186, between the 3186 and 3105 pivots. And this 3105 pivot could be considered a 31 pivot just because it's a round number, and it is right there at that same level in the middle of this consolidation range. So it has gone in the overnight down to 3108. I would say that may be a level of support for Twitter. If it goes through the 31 level, you have another pivot down here, which you could. I mean, there's not a lot of activity in this area, so if it does fall, it will probably fall all the way down into this consolidation range at least. So um, you could get another dollar or 70 cents if it falls through the 31 level. Um, if it stays at 31, you can see here the start of this kind of basing area, the first low rather is at 31. So if it holds there, it would keep this basing pattern kind of intact, right? So it wouldn't ruin it too much. I mean, it would still be intact even if it fell down to this trend line, but for it to be healthy, it shouldn't really go below the 31 level. So we'll wait to see if it starts to recover in the pre-market, and we could buy it over the first 5-minute high or 1-minute high, depending on how strong it is or how the activity just before the open. You can see here it is already recovering and making a higher low right here. So if pre-market it doesn't get below this 31.48 level and starts to climb, I would look for it. I would look to buy Twitter after the first 1 minute or 5-minute bar above that high, and then buying a second piece if it doesn't get here. Buying a second piece over this 32.45 area because this is a little bit of a lower high or a topping pattern here. So we'll be looking for it to get strength over that before we buy a second piece. I'll probably buy half of my intended position at the open after the first 1 or 5-minute high, and then if it crosses above here, I'll buy the second piece. Um, and then the targets, you have your pivots here as targets. You could utilize the 3361, or you could even throw Fibonacci on this from the overnight high to low. I mean, granted, the spike high is pretty high, but we can go ahead and put it on there and see what it looks like. And the 50% fib is right at the 3361 pivot, so we'll just remove that um, and use 3361 as our target for Twitter. And that would bring it to almost a gap fill. So if it's gapping down here and starts to fill this gap, I mean, you also have this trend line which kind of hits right at the same level as that pivot. So that's a possibility. If on the other hand it shows weakness on the open, I'm not trading it unless it gets back below this 31. So if it opens up here and kind of shows a little weakness and stays in this area or comes down here, I'm not trading it until it crosses down below this 31 pivot. Then I'll short the stock for this move here. Okay, so that's Twitter. Other stocks that have reported this morning include Hain Celestial. This is a pretty weak open weak move on Hain. Its earnings came out this morning. You can see Hain has been a weak stock for a while. It's shown a lot of weakness, um, since prior to the October rollover in the market. It's been a week even into last year. So taking a look at this chart on the weekly, you see it had a pretty big drop here in 2016, and then it consolidated and it started to drop again uh, all through last year and 2017 even. So it's slated to open around 13.15 now, which is actually below the low of the past few years. We can take a look at the all like 15 years. Yeah, okay. So the all-time low looks like it's 559 here. Um, so we'll go ahead and put a line there for that pivot. You also have some, you know, this pivot here from back in 2012, which is right where it is right now, and actually almost right where it hit 1311. So maybe anticipate a little support there. It already has shown quite a bit of recovery up to 1450. So if it decides to roll back over and hit that 1311 area, I would say that would be uh, a good buying opportunity. Go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and put a pivot right here at the low from the last. I think the low is a little bit. It's 15 something, so we'll change that. Yeah, 1501. So 1501 is the prior low, and it should. I mean, it should probably show some resistance there. Um, but if it doesn't, you could play it. If it starts getting strong again, you could play it for either 50% retracement, gap fill. This isn't my favorite uh, play. I just wanted to bring it to you guys because it was such a big drop in a name that's already shown so much weakness. So here are the 50% retracements for the Fibonacci rather, so you can look and see if it does start showing some strength where potential resistances could be. Um, but I probably personally won't be trading Hain. So we've got Hain also reported earnings. Also reported earnings today was Dunkin' Donuts. Dunkin' also showing some weakness down into the 65.70 area. So it's looking to open right around here in this area, 66. So that's actually a prior pivot as well. You've got a pivot right here around 66.05. Of course, down here as well at the bottom, and we'll go ahead and put one right here also. So there are some pivots to the downside you can look at in Dunkin' if you're looking to trade that to the downside. Um, it could break through this 66 pivot and go all the way down to the 63.21 area, 63.20 area. So it looks like it's crossed through it in the overnight. So I'd be looking for potential, um, an area where it rolls over. If it shows weakness right off the open and goes to that 66 level, I would look to be shorting that um, for a move down to this area here in this consolidation. Personally, Duncan doesn't have a lot of volume. Excuse me, a lot of volume. But I mean, it just depends on how it acts. I'm leaning more towards the Twitter trade and the FireEye trade. But there are a couple of other options. So we talked about Twitter, FireEye, Dunkin', and the last one that we talked about. Uh, and so we're going to be looking at Grubhub next, um, which is another stock that reported earnings. Because this has actually made a great head and shoulders or reverse head and shoulders base prior to earnings. It has a really good pattern for a positive move or an up move off the earnings, but with the market being so, it's turned over today a little bit. I would probably watch for this one a little bit more or hesitate on trading this today anyway because of the market being weak. But just as an overall analysis on Grubhub, you've got a reverse cup and handle right here. Is one pivot where it has broken out of in the earnings. So 84 area was that pivot. It's at 89 right now already. So it's already here near the nice round number of 90. You can see this here is a potential pivot at 91.30, and then you've got this 102.04. You also need to be 102.84 rather. You also need to be aware of the round number of 100, and you know uh, these round numbers 90, 100 could be areas of resistance as well. And you actually have a gap fill if it crosses up through 102.84 up to 109.19 gap fill possibility. So probably I would say the move here, because the depth of this reverse head and shoulders is about $15. Um, I'd say maybe around 100 would be my target at the most. So if if you're trading the stock and it shows some strength on the open and you want to trade it over the first 5 minute high or first 1 minute high, um, for this one I'd wait at least 2 to 5 minutes, just because you can see it's quite choppy, not a lot of volume in the overnight. So give it a couple of minutes to settle down, 2 to 5 minutes, and then if you want to trade it over the first 5 minute high or 2 minute high, I would use the pivot of 91.30 as your first target up here. And then if it crosses through that with strength, you have this $100 level. Go ahead and you know, go ahead and put yourself a pivot at $100 just because it is such a um, strong number, right? It's 100. It's a round number. I'll put a dashed line so I can differentiate it. It's not really a pivot. It is a round number of, um, a significance. But once it crosses through the 91.30 level, you probably need to just continue to pull up your stops if it does happen to make it, strongly through this area, because there is some congestion here, and I guess this could act as a pivot as well. 97.88. We'll go ahead and put it on there. Um, but it's sloppy in this area, so just pull your stops up. But you have some targets now at least to look at between after the 91.30 level, 97.88, 100, then 102.84, which is at the bottom of the gap here. So obviously, if it goes through 102.84, you'd be looking for a gap fill. Don't think it's going to do that today. Probably, I'll be keeping an eye on this stock for a few days to a week just to see how it acts, especially since the market's weaker today. May get into it for a swing trade if it shows any weakness. I mean, I think if it can maintain this 83.95 support, um, I'd say 84. If it maintains an $84 support, um, I would look to buy it for a bounce play off 84 if it shows weakness with the market, for a swing trade. So if this stock does end up kind of being weak with the market, I would be looking for an opportunity for a reversal in it down here, either red to green move or rounded bottom or whatever, just any kind of basing pattern, and then um, an upside move, just to pardon me, just to get it lower than it is right now. Because I do believe that this stock will be showing some strength for the longer term, right? For weeks out. So that's Grubhub. So we talked about Grubhub. We also have Fiat Chrysler that reported this morning. This is a car stock, and if you look at Ford and GM, who previously reported, let's just take a look at Ford. Previously reported, not really a big move there. Had a down move on the day it reported, but it's kind of consolidated ever since. GM, I think, reported yesterday, and it had a pop to the upside to this trend line, and it's still quite positive. So with Fiat Chrysler, let's go back there. Fiat Chrysler has been quite weak after earnings. It closed at 17.35, and it has gone down to 15.27 in the pre-market. So we have some pivots. 15.07 is the next pivot to the downside. Um, in this area here, you also have a 14.97, but that's all around the same range. So basically, between around $15 is the next area of support on Fiat Chrysler. Because it had, let's just see, did it miss earnings? Um, so it looks like they're getting profit sharing for their employees, and um, it looks like it had some decent earnings. I can't tell whether it beat earnings or not, but it looks like it's pretty weak off the open regardless. So I would be looking for a bounce. Just looking at the other car makers and how they've fared after earnings. It's been very positive. I would look for Fiat Chrysler to bounce down here off the $15 level. I mean, it could also go all the way down to this trend line, which I drew from the prior two lows. I mean, granted, it has crossed below that and come back up, but it could act as an area of support now because it went through it and it kind of acted as resistance for a minute, gapped back up, has been up ever since, and now it's coming back down towards it. So if it could act as as an area of support if the stock gets below 15. I would anticipate it probably won't get below this 15 level. You can see these prior two lows. This looks like kind of an anomaly here. And then, if it shows some strength in some support in the 15 area level and starts to recover, that could be a pretty good bottoming pattern in Fiat Chrysler. So I'll be looking for a bounce here. It didn't make it all the way to 15, so it might show some weakness in the morning and come back down to 15. And if it does, I'd be looking for it to bounce off 15. You have some pivots you could use as targets. You got the $16 pivot, which it might show some resistance there. I would say that would probably be my target, just that $1 um, between 15 and 16. And then you could, take off some of your position and, let the other half ride if it starts to show some strength above 16 and see if it recovers for a gap fill or, up to the 1654 pivot and the overnight high of 17, etc. So, but from what it looks like, I think Twitter, FireEye, Twitter and FireEye look the best to me right now. O'Reilly is something I want to look at, as well, but it's too positive. So I would probably hold off on that. That did have earnings today. It's crossed above its all-time high of 363. It crossed above this kind of wedge pattern here. It's broken out. So if it stays above 363.20, that's a breakout on O'Reilly. But today for me is not the day to be playing a stronger stock with the market being weak. So it may not be on my list of things to trade. Um, so basically Twitter and FireEye for the primary trades for today for earnings. And that's pretty much it. So you have some things to choose from. There's quite a few earnings today with all of those stocks that we talked about, Grubhub, as well. For the long side, is something I'll be looking at for a swing trade, not just an intraday earnings trade. So Twitter, FireEye, and Grubhub are probably my primary targets today. Um, and then we'll see what the day brings. So there should be some more earnings being reported uh, today and in the evening. And so we'll come back to you after the market closes today with an update on the trading for the day, a trade recap, as well as potentially some picks for earnings for tomorrow. Okay? Thanks. Have a great night and happy trading. Have a great day, rather, and happy trading.